This morning, guys, I went for a little morning walk, as I do, in the backyard, walk down to the pond, kind of walk in a big circle, gather my thoughts, think about my day. And I started thinking about the NFC South, guys. Um, I was thinking the NFC South might be better than people think this year. And maybe I'm
Ooh,
crazy, but I think the NFC South might surprise some people. I think there's going to be some teams in this division that are tough outs. We're not here to pick the division today. This is just a division preview. I'm not putting my nuts on the line with a month to go before we play real football. I'll give you that when we do the big pick'em pod where we pick the division winners and that sort of thing. I still have to go to Atlanta in a couple days to the Atlanta Falcons training camp. They were gracious enough to welcome us down there, or will be gracious enough to welcome us down there for the Monday practice. So I'm certainly not gonna pick the division at this point. I don't want to, in case Atlanta's not first in the division. I don't want to, no, that'd
yes.
be bad form.
Yeah. No, that's a great business strategy, I would say.
Yes, I think
Especially,
so too. And moreover, I actually think the Falcons might be kind of cagey this year. Okay, like you see how I'm using like adjectives that you can't really hold me to.
yep.
I will tell you one thing about this division. The Bucs are going to be good. They're going to be good. Spoiler alert, your boy is bullish on the Bucs. I was bullish on the Bucs last year. I think I picked them to win the division. They started 4-6,
Yes.
and I was wearing it for a little
Actually,
bit.
as you'll recall, you made that pick, and our guy Stanford Steve, disagreed. He put the Falcons in the Super Bowl.
He did put the Falcons in the Super Bowl. No need
Yeah.
to unearth the skeletons in certain people's closets.
Yeah, I know. That wasn't cool
No,
of
it's
me. That
fine.
wasn't
It's
cool.
fine. Steve's got plenty of wins, dude. Steve's got plenty of wins. When you play a lot of games, you're gonna lose some. Steve has to know
No
college
doubt.
football. He has to know pro football. We'll have Stanford Steve on the show soon. But yeah, I'm a big Bucks fan, dude. We had Levante David on the show this week. Actually, go back and check that out if you get a chance. I think the Bucks are going to be good, but I think the division as a whole will be better than people think. I'm not saying the Saints are going to win 10 games, but I think people are undervaluing every team in this division in a way, and part of that is because of the market, like the markets in this division. I think in Atlanta, it's like a factory of sadness, sports city. It's a really fun city. I can't wait to go to Atlanta, right? Get some of them lemon pepper wings at Magic City, like Lloyd Howell. Although I'm not going to visit the ATM. Probably should go in during the day shift, you know? It's more
We'll get our cash
inconspicuous.
beforehand.
Yeah. So here's the deal, man. Like, I got respect for all these programs. Even though I don't think David Tepper likes me very much. I've been one of the few people that never gave up on Bryce Young, and the fruits of my labor, and people like me started to show up late last season. I think New Orleans has got a great program. I think the team that most people think is going to be the betting favorite to win the division has a great program in place, and I'm a big Raheem Morris fan. So I have positive things to say about this whole division. It's going to be a really positive preview. And we'll start with the Bucs, shall we? The Bucs. All right, last year they at certain points in the season I thought they were on the cusp of being a scary team to deal with, but the injuries just kept them out of it. I'm not making a bunch of excuses. They won the division. They finished with honestly like it was like a meltdown level loss in the wild card. I think that had they won that game, not to do revisionist history, I think they go to Detroit and win. And I listen, the Eagles were like the Monstars last year. I don't know if anybody could have been close, but of all the teams in the NFC that could have given them a game in the NFC Championship, I think they're right there because of their history and the way that they play Philly, if not for nothing else. So last year was about the injuries. It was about turnovers. They had 24 of them. What are they? -5 in the turnover differential last year. That number stuck in my head. That's not like usually what you say about a really good team. And I thought they had the bones of a really good team. That playoff game, you had the red zone issues, the ball security issues, so frustrating. And as a bettor, admittedly, that was part of the frustration for me because I was betting the Bucs. I got my ass handed to me on a silver platter on Sunday night when I laid probably the biggest bet of the season. I was Chase Long that evening, and I ended up betting the Bucs in that Cowboys game. And if you remember that Cowboys game, the Cowboys played like they were going to the Super Bowl. It was unbelievable. Dudes were decapitating people. There was yak. There were back-breaking conversions. There were the Bucs just not getting out of the Bucs' way. And to me, that's what they have to eliminate, because when you look at this team now, that team that lost 4 straight last year, starting with that Baltimore game, and if you watch the Baltimore game, you remember that maybe for a quarter you felt like they could hang with them. They lost like 41-31 or something, and it wasn't close. But you thought for a quarter before Evans and Godwin got hurt, and it's just like it was like the Bermuda Triangle for them. You thought for a little bit, you were like, this is the team that I think they can be. And they went on that 4-game skid where they go Baltimore, Atlanta, who owned them, Kansas City, San Francisco. Kansas City and San Francisco, close games. They went into Arrowhead on a Monday night, I think it was, and took them to the wire. So
overtime.
This is a good football team. They've beaten good football teams. They beat Detroit and Philly last September. Obviously, Philly wasn't the team that they turned out to be. And a couple years ago in the playoffs, they made real noise. I remember that Detroit game being really competitive. So this Todd Bowles team, this Jason Light outfit, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they're one of the few programmatic teams in the NFL. And by that I mean they have a way of doing things. They have a program in place, down to the fact that the guy who we had on the show earlier this week, Levante David, there's a silhouette of him in their draft room, and it describes basically the archetype of what they want a Buccaneer to be. They have an intentionality about them. They've won 4 straight division titles quietly. Although they won a Super Bowl, it feels like people still undervalue them because we're in the post-Tom Brady era. They stuck the landing on bringing Baker Mayfield in, who people left for dead. They've had 3 offensive coordinators over the past few years. They've had 2 different quarterbacks, as I mentioned. Todd Bowles has won in cap hell 2-3 years ago. He won with injuries last year, got him in the playoffs. Really knocking on the door of elite this year, and I think they walk through the door this year. And the question I would ask to people listening and watching, and you don't have to fry me in the fucking comments, but tell me what you think. Has any NFC team that was in the playoffs last year gained more ground than the Bucs? And I mean that in a sense that the people who are injured are going to be back. There's a lot of assuming that they're going to stay healthy. But they also added free agents and draft picks in a really surgical manner. And those picks were engineered by a scouting program and a GM who has a track record of doing the right shit. So I do trust them. I'm sorry. Just by getting injured players back, Evans, Godwin, Servassier Dennis, who's got the best name in the NFL. He's got a first name for a last name and a liquor brand for a first name. Like, that's electric. That guy was born to be a star. And when we watched him early last year, we were like, he will be an important player for this Bucs team, but he got hurt. And I didn't even mention Antoine Winfield, who, and I kind of lobbed this alley-oop to Levante David the other day. I said, has there been a player since you came along that you thought, hey, this is a guy I can pass the torch to. This is the next guy. They say he's him. Is he him? You know, it's kind of that's what the cool kids say now. My kids, I don't know if it's the cool kids because my kids say it, but like they're like, I'm him. Is he that man?
There you go.
Is he that man? Right? That's what they're talking about when they talk about Levante David. When they draft a guy, they ask, is he that man? And Antoine Winfield is cut from the same cloth. He's a guy that was a pro from the minute he walked into the NFL, and he's a Swiss Army knife. And when you lose him, you don't just lose a player. You lose an access point to doing a number of things defensively. And they lost him for 9 games last year. When you miss 9 games as an important player on a team, it's kind of like your year didn't even happen. You're never going to be yourself. And the defense is never going to be itself. So they've added the pieces. We talked about the draft, free agency, obviously, where you've got guys like Hassan Reddick who are going to play very meaningful snaps for them and going to address positions of need. They bring in the wide receiver from Ohio State, Emeka Egbuka. By the way, McMillan came on strong last year. If everybody stays healthy, they have an embarrassment of riches outside, right? That's a big if because Evans is older and Godwin's had injuries, but they have enough depth this year to overcome if somebody does go down. And they also showed the flexibility last year when those guys got hurt to get in 13 personnel and run the football. If you remember some of those games where like their third running back, Sean Tucker, is that his name?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Ran for like 100 yards and, you had a couple 100-yard rushers in the same game. Like, at one point we thought Rashad White was going to be the future of the Bucs backfield. Then it turned into this Bucky Irving show, and in the second half of last season, he went off. So his usage wasn't even like as high as it could have been. They've got a fresh stable of backs. They have guys outside. They returned 5 starters on the offensive line. How many teams in the NFL are returning 5 starters on the offensive line? Now, Wirfs is going to miss a month, probably. Charlie Heck's going to be the guy that steps in for him. I also think what's helpful for this team when you look at an offensive line, and they don't really need the help, but maybe for a guy that's filling in, is they get the ball out. Like, they play with timing. Quick game is lethal for them. Also, I want to take a second. My rotator cuff's a little tight, but if I could pat myself on the back, I did say last year that Will Barton's going to be a Hall of Famer. Said that before. Graham Barton. I got to know his name when I induct him in the Hall of Fame. Will Barton is like a shooting guard. I think he played for the Denver Nuggets. So Graham Barton, the Duke center, he's going to be a second-year guy, hell of a player. Listen, it's a fun group. We just went through the entire offense, and then you get to the quarterback who's on his 8th coordinator in like an 8-year career in Baker Mayfield. And he's a guy who doesn't lack confidence, right? In a good way. I think we've seen that like over time. Back when he like planted the flag at the middle of the field, like when they beat Kansas or whatever, and some of his antics, which I think some people conflated with maybe some of the overconfidence that like a Johnny Manziel had, right? Like he's not the same type of guy. Like he's got the right kind of confidence, right? And not for Johnny Manziel to catch a stray. I love Johnny Manziel, but like I think a lot of people looked at Baker Mayfield and saw a guy who was immature and stubborn and all that stuff, and maybe he was, but he grew over his career, and he's had to deal with a lot of bullshit, including one of those coordinators being Freddie Kitchens and things like that. Being a guy that gets run out of Cleveland. Cleveland hadn't won shit in a long time. They're guys walking around with jerseys with 20 pieces of athletic tape on the back with quarterbacks' names written on them, right? Like from Dorsey to whoever. And Mayfield's the guy that goes to plays Pittsburgh in the playoffs, and they don't just beat him, they score like 40 points. And then he gets hurt and they run him out of town. Like he has not deserved the treatment he has gotten in the NFL, and I'm very happy that the Rams took a chance on him because I felt like that was an opportunity for him to take a beat, spend some time with a guru, and rehab himself. He spent time in Carolina and then winds up in the same division. Now is the guy. And I think what's so different about this coordinator change, and certainly from Canales to Cohen is kind of the same thing, but now 3 years in, when you have a new coach in the NFL, and I had a number of coaches, and I was one of those guys that, like, when a coach comes in early in my career, I'm a high draft pick. At certain points in my career, I'm one of the better, if not one of the best players on defense. Like, that new coach is going to come in and find you first. Like, you're one of the first people that new coach finds. And I hate the feeling of a coach coming in and trying to reinvent the wheel and being like, hey, really like your game, but, I got some new things that you're going to try that, or I have some ideas of ways that you can reinvent the wheel. And usually that conversation is had in the summer or in the spring. And the guy sitting in the other chair is like, come on, like I'm making strides. Like I'm playing well. Like why we got to change everything? And I think for a number of these coordinator changes and situational changes, Baker was the guy that, like, people were trying to fix, even though maybe it wasn't as broken as people thought. In Tampa, it's certainly not broken. And now, with Cohen leaving, you got Josh Grizzard. You listen to Lizard Lick, North Carolina, which I imagine on my little Google Maps would be like a little town, unincorporated community of 238 people with like a tractor pull and shit like that and a bunch of moonshine. It's just a suburb of Raleigh. But anyways, this guy, he's young. He was in Miami for a long time. He's been in the building with the Bucs, but he's also been in Tampa, and he's a guy who's, the conversation with Baker is probably going like this: we're going to build on what we have, and we're going to try to stay ahead of the curve, but we're not reinventing the wheel. And so I think Baker's got a lot of confidence anyways, but this is as confident as he's ever been, and for the right reasons. And the guys in the locker room are confident in him. So I think with all that having been said, this offense, when it's firing on all cylinders, is hell. It's tough to play this team. And so can they stay healthy? And can the offensive coordinator just build on what they did last year and not fuck it up? But look at the way they finished the season. The turnovers and the mishaps against Washington. We talked about the defensive problems and some of the, frankly, more of the same shit in the Dallas game offensively. They were sloppy. They got to clean some things up. But I think personnel goes a long way in cleaning this stuff up. Like, listen, the defense, this is where they have to improve, right? They had some injuries. We talk about pass rush. We love Yaya Diaby. We love Vita Vea. Vita Vea he's a straw that stirs the drink up front, and that's rare for a guy who lines up in a shade or over the nose to be that guy. But in today's NFL, there's not a lot of guys like him. And when he gets down that three-point stance and starts eating up double teams and displacing centers and moving furniture around, kind of the same way we talk about Dexter Lawrence.
No gloves on.
The whole defense plays better. And so, having that group and then adding, a guy like Hassan Reddick, they've got some nice pieces up front. Kalijah Kancey, a pick guy, had 7.5 sacks last year and didn't even play a full season in year 2. This guy's good. He's a good player. This can be a good front. And I love the way Diaby's like a bully, dude. He's like a power rusher. And then you've got Reddick, who's more of an Ole guy on the other side. He's more cut from a cloth of like an outside backer. But he can play with his hand in the dirt. He can handle tight end sets. He's an experienced player. And if the rust isn't too thick to shake off, he's going to be a double-digit sack guy. So you add all these pieces up front. You've got Servassier Dennis coming back to play possibly next to Levante David, which is a spot that honestly they've been trying to secure since Devin White kind of fell off. For a span there, Devin White and Levante David patrolling the second level was a lot of fun to watch. Very fast. Dennis is I don't know if he's Devin White fast, but he's a fucking burner. And so You got speed at the second level. And then on the back end, this is where I think a lot of the work's being done, right? On the back end, you need rookies to step up. The way we talk about Maxwell Hairston in Buffalo being a major domino, if you can get starter play out of that corner, then it's a big domino for the rest of the defense. The same thing with Benjamin Morrison, who was hurt and fell to round 2, but they hope he's the guy, right? They added a guy, Parrish from Kansas State, who played in the slot. If he can play in the slot, now I know there's different ways, and I hate this time of year where we look at depth charts and everything seems simple, but then when you look at the secondary, you're like, who's going to play nickel? And that's always the big conversation in today's NFL. If Parrish can play in the slot, as he did in college, that clears up a lot. You get Winfield back, who, again, missed 9 games. Tyke Smith factors in. Izzian factors in. If they can get a lot out of these young players, they got a shot to be pretty good on the back end. And you heard Todd Bowles talk about it. They were the number 1 blitz team in the league since he's been there. And the one thing that Todd Bowles said, and I caught this in an interview with Kay Adams, what are you excited about this year? One of the first things out of his mouth was, we have more man corners. I thought last year they were aggressive in their blitz rate, but because of personnel and some other things, they had to play softer coverage behind it. And so, there were certain voids in the field underneath the teams took advantage of. If they can be more competitive on the back end, then you match that aggressiveness with good coverage, everybody eats. I think this defense can be fun to watch. So I don't know if I'm missing anything, Nolan, there on the defensive side of the football, but this is a complete football team.
Yeah, I was just going to add with the secondary. We were talking about this a little bit pre-show. It's really interesting to see how this secondary came together, especially if Morrison can really play. It kind of feels like, or kind of projects like, a Kansas City secondary where obviously you have your stud in McDuffie, but then you have a collection of versatile skill sets that allow you to solve different problems on a week-to-week basis
based on matchups.
Offenses. Right. So I think they've set this secondary up pretty well to kind of be able to challenge the different offenses they'll see.
And you look at the schedule, they're at the Texans, at the Falcons, weeks 1 and 2, which is a big division game in week 2. I mean, look, the Falcons owned them last year, and a lot of it was because they didn't have that corner. And being able to solve the Drake London problem is a domino effect that, you can project that out onto a number of matchups, but definitely against that Atlanta offense, which we're going to talk about in a second, is a good offense. They got to take care of the teams in division, and last year Atlanta owned them. But it's a new year. At Seattle in week 5, you finish with 4 of 6 at home. I think that the if you look at the end of their schedule, you've got versus Arizona, versus New Orleans, versus Atlanta, 3-game homestand, at Carolina, at Miami, and then versus Carolina. So you can knock off 4 division wins if you get hot at the end of the season, which I think they will. And you don't have to play in the cold, and you don't have to go far from home. You're going to Carolina, you're going to Miami. That's it after Thanksgiving. Okay, you got a tough stretch at Buffalo, at LA in November. Also hosting New England early in November, who I think is going to be actually a tough out. But it kind of lines up for you well. And so this could be one of those teams that, they might start a little slow. You might say, Chris, what are you talking about? They started 4 and 6 last year. I don't think it's going to be there. But I think they're going to, by December, they're going to round into form and be a scary, scary team.
Yeah, and it's like, Chris, you talk about what Coach Belichick would say at Inside the NFL last year about how, it's not about who you play, it's when you play them, whatever the exact quote was. You look at the schedule, this is a team that could be really hot come January, and nobody wants to draw that team in the first round of the playoffs.
No question. So on to the Falcons. Falcons, we're doing this in the order how the division finished last year, but the Falcons 8-9 last year. And at times last year, it didn't feel like that's who they were. At times they looked like a really good football team out of the gate. Obviously they swept the Bucs. They start 6-3, and then Kirk gets hurt. And part of the deal with the Kirk injury was, and we could see it, he wasn't right. And there's players all over the league who aren't physically right, and we can judge their performance without knowing that. At quarterback, it's a little easier to see. And I think when Kirk got hurt, it was evident. They go on a 4-game skid, or they go 1-4 over a course of 5 games, culminating in the Raiders win, where Kirk gets benched. And they'd seen enough. But in the process, and this is the thing, when Kirk Cousins got signed in Atlanta, and he's coming off an injury, there was a lot of speculation of, is he healthy? Remember, there was some tampering stuff. I think a lot of it had to do with like the trainers and that sort of thing. Like rehab was a thing, and it was a thing going into the summer. And, people really balked at, Fontenot and the Falcons getting Michael Penix early in the draft. I was not one of those people. I think about the future of the team, and I said this. I was like, hey, in 2 years, if Penix is your starting quarterback, nobody's going to care that you were redundant in 2024. And that's kind of where we are now, because they hand the keys over to Penix. And another thing is, like, I know you don't want Kirk to get hurt, but if it were time this offseason and Kirk played a full season, then you got no tape on Penix. The preseason would be huge, and it is huge. But in year 2 with Zach Robinson, you've got a guy who's already played meaningful snaps. He's played in a couple overtime games, I believe. And he made some big throws. He sprayed the ball a little bit. Like, he missed some easy throws. But I think most people, if you had to say, hey, what'd you think of Michael Penix at the end of last year? He was more pro-ready than we thought. And I don't know if he'd have rolled out in September if we'd have thought that. Starting games in December for a team that you've been with for the better part of 6 months now is a lot better. And starting this season with a guy who's played in a couple games is a lot better than the alternative, which would have been, hey, this is a big preseason for Michael Penix. I thought there was some really valuable learning on the job for Michael Penix at the end of last season. And listen, the offense was really good, really balanced. Okay, I'm not nitpicking here because I think the lack of investment by Atlanta this offseason in the offense is evidence that they know just that. So, like, I'm just going to tell you what they got. I think it's, for them, about running it back with potentially better quarterback play and tweaks. And I'll talk about some of those tweaks. But listen, Bijan Robinson is the straw that stirs the drink in my opinion. This guy he's already an elite back. You can swing the ball out to him in the flat, and he'll make people miss. He's got a really good feel for their scheme, outside zone, which they run really well. They're a good running football team. 4 out of 5 offensive linemen return. We talked about that with the Bucs with 5 of them. This isn't as good a group, but in the run game, sometimes you can't tell. They're replacing Dahlman at center, which is always a big deal. Newsel, though, did play last year. And McGarry, and this is something that people don't think about enough, but McGarry is now protecting the blind side, and he's not your best pass protector. So that's one thing you have to think about. I also want to talk about the fact that Storm Norton's probably the third tackle, which is not the best situation. So I kind of wonder what happens there if somebody goes down. But we go back to last year. Kirk Cousins, definitely not right. We know about the ankle and that sort of thing, and then there were more injuries that were a result of just getting fucking decked. You saw it in the Netflix documentary Quarterbacks. You see how hard some of those hits are when you got the good mics and the high def video of him just getting planted into the turf. Like, that's a 30-something-year-old man, and it took its toll. But when they came into the season, we wondered how the mobility was going to affect the way they ran their offense, and the answer to that for them was, hey, like, we can't even hand the ball off from under center. Like, we're going to get into the pistol. That was the fix for them. And what's interesting about that is when you look back, and I didn't realize it in real time, but they didn't really come off that pistol stuff, even when Penix came in the game. And it makes sense because Penix never really hung out under center in college. I will be curious with a full offseason under his belt where the offense centers around him if they're going to be under center more. And I say that because this should be a good play action team. It has to be a good play action team. With the way they run the football, you are leaving a lot of money on the table if you do not run play action. Last year, they were last in the league there. So you want to see them get into the play action, take advantage of the looks, and you know the bind that they put defenses in because of their run offense. If they can make these little tweaks, and there are more tweaks to make, but that's the main one for me. They can take the next step offensively, which I'm excited to see what that looks like. This is a big year for Terry Fontenot, and honestly, it's a big year for the entire staff, the organization. I don't know how long Raheem Morris lasts if they don't get better this year. Jeff Ulbrich, who comes from New York and had to deal with all that bullshit up there, and then he had to deal with his son doing what he did, and this has been a tumultuous kind of year and a half, 2 years for Jeff Ulbrich. He's a good defensive coordinator. But everybody in Atlanta has to, for job security purposes, they have to get better. And it all centers, in my opinion, around the defense. And when I say that, the reason I bring up the GM or the de facto GM is a lot of that defense performance is going to be predicated on young players. We talk about this like nearly decade-long hunt for a pass rusher. Vic Beasley had like 15 one year. And since then, it's really been a void that they've been trying to fill. Like, who's the guy that can pull the fucking sword from the stone? And this year, they take a big swing at it. Last year, they drafted that kid Trice, who got hurt. He's kind of an afterthought at this point, but they traded up to get James Pierce, who seemed to be one of the most polished rushers in the draft. He's got to play well, right? When you trade up to get a guy, he's got to play well. Jalen Walker, another guy that they can use in different ways, and a guy that I kind of fell in love with watching him do his pre-draft agility and seeing him move around. Like, I was like, man, this guy's a stud. If they can get a lot out of these young guys, and you bring in a guy like Leonard Floyd, who, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated pass rushers of this little generation. Guy's got 72 sacks on his career. I think a lot of people judged him off his slow start in Chicago, but he's been wildly productive everywhere he's gone and consistent pretty much. He's a good vet to bring in. You have this group that all of a sudden there's less speculation than before. I mean, obviously you've got speculation with the draft picks, but you've thrown a lot at it. Somebody's got to perform well. You got to fix the coverage, right? Like, and rush and coverage go hand in hand. Everybody knows that, but like some of this pass rush, Ibakite had a nice year last year. I like him. But some of the pass rushing issues they've had might not be as bad as they presented because the coverage isn't very good. And you talk about how important the nickel position is in the NFL. D. Alford was like picked on last year. He was getting picked on the playground last year. They were bullying this guy in coverage. And so you've got to take care of the nickel spot. And Billy Bowman's the guy. He's got to be one of the most important players for them on this whole roster. The kid out of Oklahoma, was looking at some of his highlights last night. Listen, I'm not a big draft guy. I've kind of planted my flag as an NFL guy, not a draft guy. So take everything with a grain of salt that I say. But the one thing I noticed about Billy Bowman is he can really run and he can tackle. And they were poor tacklers last year. He's got to be good in coverage. Xavier Watts winning the spot opposite Jesse Bates would be great. He's a Notre Dame safety. Tackling's got to be better. They didn't play a bunch of man. I don't know if that changes if the personnel improves. That would help the pass rush. They just couldn't get off the field last year. And that's really hard. When you've got a running offense, you'd like to be able to control the clock. But the defense has to play a part in that too. And rush and coverage work together. They've got to stop the run, man. They got to get to third down. Last year they got pushed around. So you look at the guys on the interior and you say, hey, how can we be better? Not a lot of people are going to talk about, Zach Harrison or Morgan Fox, who a really good veteran addition that they had, who's now, he's like, man, I feel old, but he's like 10 years into his career. Rook Arororo, David Onyemata, who spent time in New Orleans. I like him. These guys, they've got an important job. Caden Ellis is a good player. They bring in Divine Diablo from Vegas. They expect a lot out of him. The interior of we're spending a lot of time on the pass rush. The interior run defense, with the departure of guys like Grady Jarrett and that sort of thing, you're kind of turning over a new leaf. You let Judon walk, Simmons at safety. Like, this is a changing of the guard defensively for this group. You still got guys like AJ Terrell, Jesse Bates, who's one of the best safeties in the game, if not the best safety in the game right now. Actually, he was the highest rated safety in Madden. He's been a ball hawk for them, really smart player. They are changing the furniture around when it comes to this Falcons defense, and it is a big year for their scouting department, the coaching staff, everybody. A lot hinges on these young players playing well. But yeah, fix the pass rush, fix the nickel, start tackling, get off the field. It's pretty simple, right? Stop the run, all these things. If they could just do these things, there's a lot of if they could just do these things, but if they could just do these things, and they're a middle-of-the-pack defense with the offense they have, they're going to be a tough out.
Yeah, and I think something that lends to getting those young guys playing well, Chris, as you mentioned, Jeff Ulbrich taking over the defense. Historically, his defenses in New York, they were great groups with guys who were able to play fast because mentally wasn't as complex as, say, a Todd Bowles defense in Tampa. So probably less to digest for these young guys in Atlanta as they try to download the playbook. So hopefully that kind of lends well to them getting out there and playing fast and flying around.
This is a guy. All right, I'm a guy that was drafted by Scott Linehan, and Jim Haslett was the defensive coordinator, and he was there for a second, and then Spags shows up, Steve Spagnuolo, who shows up, and Spags is my guy, but it was complicated. That's a complicated defense to play in. Ton of fire zones, ton of movement, ton of you're in over defense a lot where you're head up on a tight end as a defensive end. There's a lot of thinking, which really works when you're walking into an established kind of system where there's good players around you and you're chasing a goal every year, and that goal is a Super Bowl if you're in Kansas City, and George Karlaftis comes in and a guy like that, just fall in where you can, play next to Chris Jones. Everything's not centered around you playing well. If I was a young player, if I was a rookie under Jeff Fisher or Jim Schwartz, because of the simplicity of what they were asking their edge players, my career would have started a lot faster. It's just one of those things. You get more opportunities. Things are simpler. And so I think Ulbricht's the right guy, to your point, to usher in a new generation of Atlanta Falcon defensive ends, edge players, and linemen. They're going to play fast. Javon Kinlaw got paid. You talk about building confidence. That guy's supposedly having a really good camp, and a lot of people left him for dead. But maybe it was a situation with him where he was overthinking things and he had baggage, from his last stop, and because of the expectations, and just play, man, play fast. And if Ulbricht can do that for this group, great. They kind of remind me, and I want to be careful saying this because I don't want you to misunderstand me, but I'm not saying they're like this team, but there are some parallels. Detroit, at different parts in the build, their defense wasn't very good, right? But they could hang their hat on having, and I didn't even mention Tyler Algier, who obviously having, thunder and lightning in the backfield, whatever you want to call it, change of pace back, two backs that you can they can help each other. You can manage the workload. They've got two really good backs. They have offensive linemen that move well together on a string in the run game. They have a ton of, here's another parallel, they have a ton of former players on this staff. That's something that Dan Campbell was really intentional about in Detroit. They've done that in Atlanta. There are some similarities. That's what they should be shooting for programmatically. Hey, we've got a good offensive line. We run the fuck out of the football, and we play physical offensively. If you can add the play action piece and get the defense shored up, these are all big ifs, but they can be like a poor man's Lions team, in that division. And so I'm not equating the two, but I'm saying there are some similarities there. And the guy we didn't even mention yet, is Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts has been one of the biggest NFL mysteries. Like, you know, and I don't think it's a huge mystery. He's like kind of an in-between guy. Like they've tried to use him as a wideout, and he's not quite a wideout, right? But you can't really put him in line because he's not like a blocking tight end. They got to find a way to get him the ball in space. They have to find a way to create mismatches with him because he's done it. He's produced. He produced early in his career. There's a lot of people that act like, when is his breakout campaign going to happen? That already happened, but then it's just he's been dormant because of quarterback play and the offense and that sort of thing. I'd love to see him have a big year. He's on my I'm rooting for this guy team in the NFL this year, which I might do a segment on all the guys that I'm rooting for. Kyle Pitts is one of them. I'm tired of hearing. I mean, if you're Kyle Pitts, you're tired of hearing your own name, dude. So I'd love to see him have a big year and quiet some of the doubters. Atlanta's going to be fun. I don't know what it amounts to, but they got a big overhaul on defense, but Atlanta's going to be fun. Now we get to the bottom half of this division, and I think you'll notice that these previews are going to move a little faster. It's not because I don't expect these teams to get better, or I don't care about the fans of the Panthers and the Saints. I do. We try to cover every team, but these are two teams that are, in most people's eyes, are not going to win the division. I do think Carolina, though. I think Carolina is going to take a step forward. I really do. I mentioned my confidence in Bryce Young. Listen, Nolan, you really like the offensive line. They brought in Robert Hunt. Corbett's a good player. You liked Aquanu's tape last year. He improved.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing with offensive line play year to year that you're looking for is continuity. And this group, obviously, going into last season, paid a lot of money to Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt. Those guys played well.
Lewis, yep.
Like you said, Aquanu. Yeah, Aquanu, good 2024 tape. I think he's becoming the guy they envisioned when they drafted him. And Taylor Moton's just steady as they go.
He is steady.
Veteran tackle, right. So, Corbett at center, he's only played about 9 games the last 2 years. So there's durability concerns there. But if he can be healthy,
good player.
This group, they're going to be able to protect Bryce, get him the time he needs.
And so that's the whole thing. Like, there's a lot to like about Bryce. And, last year you had the bye. They came out of the bye. They played Kansas City. They played Tampa. They played Philly. And if you're handicapping these games at that point, you're like, fuck, they're just going to get run out of the building. You remember last year the benching of Bryce and the way that it was handled. Like, to me, it could have been communicated in a little bit better fashion from a sequencing standpoint. Like, I would have liked to seen it like go down a little bit differently. But if that was the break that he needed to regain some confidence, take a beat, like just have for a month, kind of just sit back there and watch, or however long it was, sit back there and watch, just get more comfortable, get more confident, take some mental reps. Boy, did he improve when he came back. And specifically on the back end of that bye week, man, week 11, they have the bye. They nearly beat Kansas City. I mean, they nearly beat Kansas City. And Bryce made some big throws in that game. Tampa, they lost by a field goal. They muddied it up against Philly. I think they lost by less than a touchdown. I think it was like a 6-point game. And really gave Philly, all they could handle. And maybe Philly was sleepwalking. But at the end of the day, it's what you want to see from a guy that you drafted at that spot at quarterback. And, I know he's slight. I know he's small. But he really is good at turning his back to the defense and accessing everything that comes with the play action game. This is a team that can run the football. If they can hang their hat on one thing, they ran outside zone really well last year, especially under center. And to have a guy who can take snaps under center in today's NFL, a young quarterback, turn his back to the defense, make throws on the run. He's good off platform. I'm a big fan of Bryce's, and I'm really rooting for. There's another guy on the. I'm rooting for this guy team.
Yep.
They really took some steps forward, and one of the biggest steps they took forward was this offseason in trying to get him some weapons. McMillan from Arizona, big physical guy. And the way they talk about him in camp right now is he plays that way. And we haven't started playing real football yet, but the reviews out of Carolina are positive on him already. And when you think about Xavier Legette, who last year, I think a lot was expected of him. And I think, honestly, he's been set up to fail a little bit if you're expecting him to be like an elite number one. There's nothing wrong with being a really good number two in the NFL, and I think he can be that. I'm not saying he can't be a number one, but obviously at this point in his career, they brought the rookie in to be that guy. And the drops have to get taken care of, that sort of thing. But he's a good player. The problem, it's not a problem, but he's 24 years old. He was a 23-year-old rookie. I know from experience, 23-year-old rookie, you're pretty well developed. And I know that some people might look at the fact that he only started 1 year at South Carolina and kind of his production jumped way up, which is sometimes a red flag. But older player, not a lot of tape on him in college. That the outcomes are variable. And maybe the ceiling's not so high. But I think if he can settle into that number two role, he can make Panthers fans very happy. Just eliminate the drops and continue to learn on the job, man. You bring in Hunter Renfrow, who for better part of, I don't know how many years, it was a year or two, we were like, where the fuck did he go? He was a damn good player for the Raiders, and supposedly he looks pretty good in Carolina, so that's exciting. You bring back Adam Thielen. You got a nice little group. And so nice little offense you have there, Carolina. I think you're going to make some teams sweat this year. They did that last year. They're going to win some more games this year. Defensively, here's the deal. And you lose players like Clowney, Josie Jewell, Shaq Thompson, Jordan Fuller, Xavier Woods. But you kind of retooled through the draft. They're not Atlanta level when it comes to, a historic need for pass rush, but they do need pass rushers, and they need to stop the run. They got bullied last year in the run game. They did a lot of so a lot of times you like these coaches are starting too high and rotate late in the middle of field close, playing cover three or whatever, which is usually good in the run game. But they still struggled. They struggled bringing that safety down in the box. Like, they missed a lot of tackles. The run fits weren't great, and they got bullied a little bit. If they can fix that and get to third down, I'm excited to see these edge players that they brought in. Princely, edge players are getting harder to pronounce in today's NFL. You can give that a shot if you want. Anybody want to give that a shot?
Yeah, I've got it. Princely Umanmielen.
Yeah, this guy's
Princely Umanmielen.
Oh, Umanmielen. Yeah, Umanmielen. Princely Umanmielen. He looks like Slender Man out there. Like, he is so long, dude. Like, one of his steps, he's not the twitchiest, but one of his steps is like 5 feet long. And, when you watch his tape, like he was slippery for his height. Like he really did. Like, he had some good change-up moves and that sort of thing. He's not just like a long arm guy, which you might think, and maybe he develops the long arm and it becomes a real thing for him in the NFL. But like, if they can get something out of him, Scorton, is that how Nick Scorton? Am I saying his name right? I really
Correct.
like him. I really like him from watching him a little bit. I'm partial to power rushers, but I think he's a classic high floor player where he's going to give you a lot in the run game. He's going to be disruptive, and he's going to cave the pocket. And so when you need edge setters, he's the type of guy that, to me, you can't lose with him. You might not set the world on fire, but you bring in a guy like Patrick Jones from Minnesota, who we like. You're starting to get things under control up front. And also, one of the biggest things is last year they were missing Derek Brown. Derek Brown's the classic guy that, like, the average NFL fan doesn't know. And maybe if you pointed out where he was drafted, you might call him like the B word or something, but that's if you don't watch ball. Because he's pretty disruptive. And I know the numbers aren't always great, but he's an important player to this defense. And missing him last year hurt. You got Bobby Brown inside. You bring Tershawn Wharton in, Shai Tuttle, Cam Jackson. Like, those guys are going to be asked to really turn the tide for this defense. If you can stop the run, rush the passer a little bit better, you got a shot to be okay on defense. And not quite like the Atlanta thing where I think if they could get to middle of the road, they're going to be like dangerous or anything. But I'm excited to see Carolina play, and I think they win more games this year.
Yeah, and if DJ Wanham, another guy, key
Wanham.
piece for them, if he's healthy, he only played 8 games last year, but to your point, that edge room, good blend of vets with Wanham and Patrick Jones, and then see what these rookies can do. So I think they've addressed that front pretty well this offseason.
No question. Listen, we could spend a little more time on Carolina, but let me get to New Orleans because I know a lot of people have been waiting for the New Orleans preview. Do I think they're tanking? No, it's not a tank. But what it is they have been kicking the can down the road for a long time. We've talked about this, like the Derek Carr move, and guilty as charged. I was like, all right, the player in me sometimes wants to be competitive, like for the guys on a team. And, in every build, in every disassembly, every takedown of a roster, like there's a point where you're like, do we continue to try to keep this window open, or do we start over? Do we rip the Band-Aid off? And because of the Carr thing and because of the commitment to that chapter, there are some guys who missed out on a couple years of competitive football. Because I think had they ripped the Band-Aid off a couple years ago, maybe they wouldn't be in this situation. But they have been married to the kind of Sean Payton program for a long time. Like Sean Payton, Dennis Allen, it's like one program, right? Like I'm not saying the same guy, but a lot of familiar faces. They've tried to keep the continuity going. Like Mickey Loomis has been there a long time. They're another program, right? The way the Bucs are a program, but they're on the bottom looking up. I think ripping the Band-Aid off is probably the best thing they could have done this year, and they didn't really have a choice, right? Like, let's get out of cap hell. Let's see if we can have one of those drafts like the 2017 draft where they drafted Lattimore, Ramczyk, Marcus Williams, Kamara, Anzalone, Trey Hendrickson, and even Al-Quadin Muhammad, who everybody knows from the Colts and the Lions at this juncture in his career. But, like, that's a really fucking good draft. You find Trey Hendrickson late in the draft. He's like holding out right now. He's got all the leverage in Cincinnati. He's one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Anzalone's been huge for Detroit. Kamara, Marcus Williams, Ramczyk, great player for a long time at tackle. Lattimore, still doing it. So that was a great draft, and I think Mickey Loomis might have it up his sleeve. We'll see. Tyler Shuck, is he the answer? I don't think. That's kind of a stupid question at this point. Like, who's the quarterback of the future in New Orleans? Like, it's a totally speculative exercise. They want options, and this year is about onboarding all their young talent. It really is. But when you look at their skill positions offensively, they're not that bad. Like Olave, Shaheed, Brandon Cooks, Juwan Johnson. It's a fun group. I don't think it's a terrible group. And the offensive line, kicking Penning inside, who really was a failed experiment outside, like a lot. It's like the Evan Neal thing in a different package, where it's like from the beginning you could tell like this guy can't hold up in pass pro. Like he just is not an NFL tackle. Well, if you can get a good guard out of this thing, like all is not lost. And so that's why bringing in a young tackle in Banks Jr. Is hopefully the stopgap to where, you can start developing Penning at guard and start the next chapter in his career. Fuaga was pretty good last year for a young guy. They missed a lot of guys offensively last year due to injury. I mean, a ton of dudes. We can go through them all, but like Olave, McCoy, Ruiz, Kamara, Carr, Ramczyk, like key players, Carr, quarterback, 7 games. They didn't win any of those fucking games that he was gone. So like, in theory, bringing in Derek Carr, I think was an okay move, but at the juncture he was at, like physically, like it just didn't play out well for them. And here we are. And so for these players, I know a lot of people are like, yeah, this team's tanking, that sort of thing. They're not going to be very good. I've been on a lot of teams like this Saints team. Like I spent most of my career on this Saints team. It is not easy showing up to camp and being like, hey, what are our aspirations? And you can honestly say, like, hey, we're not a Super Bowl team. Like, because even the middle of the pack teams are getting sold hope. But, I think for Kellen Moore, first-time head coach who just won a Super Bowl, Brandon Staley, who's been a head coach, and we said this over and over again when he was getting run out of the building, and he should have in Charger land. But like, he's gonna as are most defensive coaches that fail at the head coach position. Eberflus, for instance, like I bet on him bouncing back as a coordinator. Same thing here. Jim Schwartz, won a good head coach, right? Spags struggled as a head coach. I was there, but he's one of the best defensive coordinators of our generation. And Brandon Staley, I think, gets a little bit devalued because of his head coaching job. This is not a situation where he's got to be the head coach. He's just got to be a coordinator again. And they are changing their defense to an odd front, which, you talk about like some of the implications of that for individual players. But I think it's interesting because they have been a 4-3 for a very long time. They're tearing this thing down. They're starting over. And one guy that I think I'm excited about is Brian Brzee, who I had that thing wrong. I didn't think he was going to be very good in the NFL, but like that's why I don't do the draft. He this might be a move that works out for him. We talked about him as being kind of a tweener, as a 3 technique, where he's not quite the twitchy, like vertical, Tampa 2 kind of Warren Sapp kind of guy. Right. But he's got length and he's got size, and I think he's played pretty well. Him playing in like a 4-eye, for instance, will work out well for a guy like Brian Brzee. So I look forward to seeing this defense. New safeties. You're filling in some guys at corner. You're a lot younger. You pull up their depth chart. Alontae Taylor's a guy we like, but it depends on where he plays, right? No,
one of the best nickel corners in the league. I think the way this group is set up, he'll play mostly outside this season. So
Kool-Aid McKinstry, who they just made a big investment in a year ago. Justin Reed is the free agent acquisition there at safety, and I love Justin Reed, and I also think like you got to have some veterans, and you do. You really have a veteran at every level of the defense, which is, if you're trying to build something and you're trying to bring a bunch of young guys in and set a standard. Listen, everything about the last Saints chapter is not useless. Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, and Justin Reed, who was not in New Orleans over this time period, but like they're all veterans. Demario and Cam, they can carry the torch into this era and teach these guys what being a New Orleans Saint is about, because it is about something. They've had a lot of success over the years, and they played tough defense at times. And they got Granderson, who's a nice player. We love Demario Davis, Pete Warner, Chase Young. So it's not like the cupboard's not totally bare defensively. It's not totally bare offensively at the skill positions. And the offensive line's not that bad. So while the quarterback position is a total fucking shot in the dark, like I don't think they're a 1-16 team. That's not what we're looking at here.
No.
Hey, last year they started 2-0. Remember, they scored like 100 points in 2 games.
91 to 27 or something.
And we were like, damn, the Saints could be pretty good. And then everybody got hurt. And that's the worst thing that could happen in 2024, but it might be the best thing that could happen in 2025, because it's time for a reset. And the last time they really did this, it wasn't the same kind of situation. But, that 2017 draft, that paid dividends, and it kind of ushered in a new era of Saints football. And so, again, you go back to like, I trust Jason Light, I trust the Bucs, I do trust Mickey Loomis, I do. I might second guess like when he did it, but hindsight is 2020, and I was right there with him when they brought in Derek Carr, and I was like, if I'm a player on that team, I'm excited about it, because that means we're not packing the 10 up. Like, this is the hard part of the NFL. Like, average career is 3 years, right? You're lucky if you play a long time. And even if you play a long time, like a year is 10% of your career if you're a 10-year player. Like, that's not insignificant. Earning windows are small, so I feel for guys that are on teams like this. I really do. But if you're a young guy, there's worse places to get drafted than New Orleans. I think they have a way of doing things, and it's definitely going to change with the coaches changing and that sort of thing. But you still got a program, and you still got Mickey Loomis, and I'm excited. I'm excited for the 2027 Saints. 2025 Saints, not as much, but hey, you can't win every year, and sometimes you got to rip the damn Band-Aid off. They were married to Dennis Allen for a long time. They were married to Sean Payton. They were married to Dennis Allen. They were married to Last Chapter. When you get a messy divorce, sometimes you got to eat ramen for a little bit, while your kids go through school and half your paycheck goes to your wife and that sort of your husband. Sometimes you got to you got to eat ramen for a little bit and hang out at the local bars and that sort of thing and see what kind of talent's out there. That's the stage that New Orleans is in. That's the stage that New Orleans is in. Like you got to crawl before you can walk. And right now they just got out of like a 20-year relationship when you really think about it. Because Dennis Allen, to me, is an extension of the same program that Sean Payton was running. He's just not the same coach. And a lot of the same faces. We talked about how old this defense was. They got younger. So we'll see. We'll see. Ramen's not so bad, honestly. Ramen's pretty good.
No, it's not bad at all.
It's kind of a delicacy, in my opinion. So,
Saints scouts, seeing what's out there, the local bars, around the country.
They're out
building
there.
The 2027 team.
They're going younger. They're going younger.
Yep.
And in a year, maybe they're gonna have a red sports car.
That's right.
But right now it's just ramen. It's sleeping on the couch. It's like, damn, I gotta fucking get my own Netflix account.
It's a rebuild. Yeah,
it's a rebuild. So, you guys like that, huh?
Yeah, imagine if
I was like, how do I explain this?
That's what dads should start calling it when they get divorced. Yeah, I'm in rebuild.
It's a rebuild.
Yeah, it's a rebuild.
It's a total rebuild.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
We had to rip the Band-Aid off. Counseling was trying to make Derek Carr work. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, dude, it's a great analogy.
And in the middle of it are the kids who they're in high school and they got to deal with this bullshit, like Cam Jordan and Demario Davis and Marshawn Lattimore.
Yep.
Lattimore likes his mom's house better. Like, it's just a whole thing. So that's the NFC South.